she couldn't leave the airport. And it was the only, I mean, it was the safest thing that she could do is just try and stay behind security. But yeah, I remember she called me late one night and she's like, I'm scared. I don't even know what to do. I'm like, what? I don't even know what to do.
Well, like I said,
But it's just, it was
stay
that,
in
that there had just been an election. And so there was, you know, workers were protesting. So they were like taking dump trucks and dumping debris in intersections everywhere. It was just mayhem everywhere.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Well, that was pretty much the gist of it. It's pretty scary.
Did she get to her destination?
Yeah, you know, yeah. Pardon?
Oh, no, she's
Oh,
graduated now.
Free. I have 2 married kids already.
You're lucky.
Hmm. I still have little ones at home too, so. Are we good? Okay, well, we'll welcome to Planning Commission, December 15th. We're gonna excuse Nan, Dwight, and Hayden. And we have 3 for a quorum, so we'll continue on with our meeting. We will have the pledge by Heather, and Kenny will give us an opening prayer.
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we ask you to please guide us in this meeting today, that we can make good decisions that will be wise and will serve our citizens of our community well. And we ask you to please bless that we'll be able to consider all of the options and again, make decisions that will benefit our community and the individuals therein. And we're grateful for the moisture that the house blessed us with, and I ask you to please bless that we can continue to receive what we're in need of. And we say this prayer in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen. Okay, let's go ahead and adopt the agenda. I am gonna make a proposal though, in there, if that's okay, Scott, to hold off on the nominations for chair and vice chair till we have the greater committee here.
I would agree. That's wise.
Don't show up there.
Otherwise, we could pick on the 2 that aren't here.
We nominate.
Everybody okay with that? We'll hold off till the meeting in January.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, other than that, so I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we adopt the agenda as is, with the exception of the nominations for chair and vice chair.
A second.
Okay, all in favor? All of us?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. I don't think there was minutes.
No,
Yep.
Bill, I'm sorry.
Oh. Hey, we've been doing really good though. Been great.
So bad.
Hey,
It's what I-
we'll let you have it. One time.
Yeah, don't worry about that.
No worries.
Issues from previous meetings.
Nothing that comes to mind right away for follow-up. As you remember, we did talk about storage units, and that's not on this agenda. Just simple matter of just giving us enough time to go back and address it. So you'll likely see it the next meeting or 2. Just FYI.
And I'm ready to have that discussion too.
Okay.
I think it was good to have that break to.
Yeah, you know, we had a couple of commissioners who weren't at that meeting either, so I'd like to get them up to speed, at least for what we've discussed up to date, and then they'll be up to speed when we have that discussion again.
Yep, great. Okay, well, let's go into our regular commission business. Our first item is a public hearing on ZTA 2022-05. We would potentially be making a recommendation to regarding the city initiated zoning text amendment to multiple sections of the, what's MC? North Logan
North Logan Municipal Code.
Municipal Code.
Yep.
All right. which are clarifications for both residential and non-residential parking services. We had talked about these a few weeks ago.
Yep, so the proposal that you'll see in the staff report is unchanged. It was identical to what we had before. So the idea here is we're wanting to clarify, our code already does in many sections state that parking needs to be paved, asphalt or concrete, but there are some sections that don't specifically mention it. So if you are taking a section and just kind of cherry picking sections out of the code, you may be confused as to what the requirement is. So we're just making that language more uniform throughout all the sections that reference parking standards. So no matter where you are in the code, it's got the same standard and you don't have to read between the lines or jump between sections to understand the full requirement.
Okay.
Do you guys have any questions on the red lines? Do you guys want to take a look at it again, or did you have a second to look at what was in there? There are some minor amendments that are more grammatical. As I put these sections in, I can't help but see the red
Fine.
squiggly lines that I find errors in existing language, and it's just okay. Like right here, it probably should have had a comma, so I just added the comma. So there's just minor non-substantive grammatical changes that as we touch different sections of code, we might as well polish it while the book
Agreed.
is open. So
Scott, my only question when I read through the changes again was, we put in paved asphalt or concrete and as the two surfaces that are acceptable in these areas. And
Mhm.
I am not a road surface expert. So is paved asphalt or concrete, can that be ambiguous?
it can to an extent, are we saying 4 inches of concrete or 3 inches of concrete? Is it reinforced concrete? Is it fiber reinforced? So no, that it's not that specific, but if anybody's going to take the time and effort to pave a surface, typically they're just going to do it to a residential or a commercial standard, so they don't have to tear it out in a couple of years and redo it.
Yeah, we wouldn't be concerned from the city for parking on a private
On a
property
private,
if it was 2 inches of asphalt or 4 inches.
right?
The idea being that we just have that surface. So I think the requirement, we're just trying to meet that really kind of that minimum.
It's an aesthetic requirement.
Yep.
If it were public property,
Yeah.
our own, if we were taking
Then we
over
would call
roads
it
in a
out.
subdivision, there's a very specific
Yeah.
standard in our
Okay.
technical manual for those.
And we do that in our design standards for curb and
Yeah, any new subdivisions, any new infrastructure that's being dedicated over the county or to the city, it's very specific as to the standard.
Okay, very good.
Yep. Any other questions?
so this is up for public hearing.
It is a legislative item. Yep.
Yeah, so we need to understand what the rules for navigating this are. Do I need to open it up?
I think you're okay. And we haven't typically taken comment over Zoom in the past, right?
Yeah, I was gonna ask that. We don't.
Yeah, there wasn't any emails or comments.
No.
Okay. So then we'll open and close the public hearing.
I think so, I mean, you've officially done it, it's suddenly like jump from behind the door and you're.
Yeah, I think just for the record, be clear that it has been opened and closed.
Okay. All right. So I'll reiterate. Public hearing has been opened. Paused, and now it's been closed. Okay. Any further comments from the commission on this? Oh,
Sir, do
public
you have
hearing,
a-
you need to read the rule. Did you
Yeah,
go
but-
have prime rib? Did they really serve prime rib?
It was like a cold cuts.
Oh, roast beef.
There's roast beef sandwiches and they call it.
All right, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing now. No. It's good. All right, any further comments from the commission? Any
No,
concerns,
feel good
anything
about
to
that.
discuss?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense to make those changes.
So I will entertain a motion.
I move that we make that positive recommendation to update the North Logan Municipal Code with the changes outlined here.
And a second.
I second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, unanimous approval.
Perfect.
Okay, second item is regarding is public hearing for also ZTA 2022. I like the numbering, Scott. -06. This would be also for the potential for a recommendation regarding city initiated zoning text amendment to the North Logan Municipal Code, Section 12D, intended to establish subdivision concept plan expiration timeline. We discussed that previous to this. We'll go ahead and take the public hearing first. So we will open that public hearing. And we will close the public hearing. Further discussion from the commission.
I
Yeah.
I didn't have any additional in my reading.
Any other context or comments, Scott, that you wanted to share?
No, I think the only thing here is the same as previously. There's a couple of edits in here,
Yeah.
just grammatical, so nothing substantive, but it's substantially similar to what you saw before. So just to clarify, if somebody submits an application for concept plan approval, if they don't even get an approval within 12 months, then the application will expire. So if they submit it to us, but then they just kind of go back and forth, we never do get them on an agenda and they don't move forward, we'll just expire it after a year. If they do get an approval, then the way that the language reads here is they have 18 months to submit an application for a preliminary plat and a development plan. So it gives them a year and a half to get some engineering done, some drawings put together and you just have to have an application in to start the next phase within 18 months. But if they don't, then it would expire.
And it would be they just need to start the next phase.
Just continue moving along. We're not
Yeah.
saying that you have to have a recorded
it done.
plat in 18
Yeah.
months.
I like that.
Was 18 months the duration we had talked about last time? For some reason, 12 had stuck in my head.
So the
That's-
12, it is there.
There's-
The 18 months is between getting an approval and then taking that next step. The concept plan, it's a little bit of a larger jump to go from a concept to a preliminary plat because you have a lot more, drawing work to do. You have to wait on engineers and consultants to put those things together to get to the next step. A development plan can be a little bit more, substantial. So I believe 12 months was discussed, but I'm not sure if maybe we're confusing just that initial expiration or the 18. I don't recall. But what is in this red line is a 12-month initial expiration and an 18-month progression expiration, I guess you could call it.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. I'm
And
tracking.
it's for both residential and commercial style developments.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got you. Yeah, I don't think I have any other questions on that either.
Heather, any comments or discussion?
No, I feel like that's really clear. I like how it's written up
Okay,
to have that
I
time
think
frame.
it's funny the issued was misspelled like 4 or 5 times in that
I
document.
think it was a copy paste, copy paste, copy paste.
yeah.
Find and replace.
It's like,
to
wait a
these-
minute, there's an extra S in there. We should run it through
It's hard.
Marie for her editing skills.
Stuff like that's hard though, when you just read, because you're reading it and you think it says that. But
Yeah.
that was a nonsense comment that's not moving us along, Marie. So it's not moving us fast, so I'll keep
Yeah,
that to myself.
I should have not.
She only meant it to me.
Oh, yeah.
True.
So we
True.
can just waste
You
time all
guys
we
can-
want,
You
right?
guys can talk about frivolous.
You know who the target was? It wasn't us.
All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Okay, I move with a positive recommendation for, do I need to list this out? ZTA 20, okay, for this to the city council, yeah.
I second the motion.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, unanimously passed to move it along. All right, item number 3, we're gonna hold off till January when we have the larger group
Sure.
here. So item number 4, review and potential consent for the 2023 Planning Commission meeting schedule.
Okay.
Looked great.
Yeah, this is actually a newer version. I just updated it today based on
Oh.
feedback from the city council yesterday. So the
Oh.
only thing you'll see that's different is April. April, we used to have meetings on the 5th and 6th, and then the 19th and 20th, first and third weeks there. The city council felt it would be best to hold just one, given that the Utah League of City and Towns has their mid-year conference that third week of April. So I did add some conference dates in yellow just to help put some context to the scheduling. And then the proposal would be just to hold one planning commission meeting on the second week in April instead of on the first and third. There is a potential conflict in September. That first week, there is an APA conference, and there's also the Utah League in Cities and Towns annual convention, typically held that first week in September. So we may need to modify that meeting schedule as we get closer, depending on how timing and items on the agenda are looking. But other than that, it's very similar to what we had this year. December, we'd have one meeting in December as well. So this is more just for your information. Your
Like
consent would be great, but we can modify throughout the year if needed.
Comments, feedback?
I love all the colors. Thank
Me
you.
too.
Yeah. Yeah,
Good
you
one.
even chose colors that my colorblind eyes can tell apart, so.
That was intentional.
Well done.
I definitely made sure that that was legible for you.
That's the goal.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, would you like us to give you consent?
Yeah, I don't know that we need to vote on this. Do you guys vote on it on the city council level?
Oh,
You just have to have a notice.
we just
Okay.
like it. We
Noted, we like it.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you for this.
Yeah.
for the record, we're ahead of the time schedule.
This is the first time ever.
We can.
I sense a positive tone and I'll take that as
Yeah.
consent.
Yeah.
Okay.
We could take 2 more minutes and then keep it right on schedule.
Okay.
Okay, let's get into the fun part, work session.
Okay.
So this first discussions regarding amendment to the moderate income housing plan that we thought we weren't going to discuss the rest of the year, and it's back because the state sent us a nasty gram.
I will, I hope you guys saw this. This
Yeah.
almost made me felt a little bit better. They did give us nasty gram. They sent it to the mayor and the city council and said, hey, by the way, this isn't good enough. Yeah, 66 non-compliant cities and 19 that actually were compliant. They sent us a formal letter, and the letter basically said it's not detailed enough. Is
Yeah.
basically what they said. They want more measurables to each action item so they can actually check boxes as you achieve the measurable steps in each strategy that we select. So what I did is I went back and I said, okay, I'll add a little bit more detail. And then I actually emailed this over to the individual within the state office of what do they call it? Yeah, it's Department of Workforce Services. I don't know. It's a weird place to house this, but the person who will be reviewing and giving us the gold star, I sent this to her and said, will this meet the requirement? And she said yes. So I'm not saying you guys have to be 100% with this. We can bounce it back and forth to the state for additional review and comment, make sure we're on the mark before we move forward. But if you are happy with this, it does comply, just as a side note. So what I did is I took it and I reformatted it, and basically the goals and strategies are identical to what they were before. In the conversations you guys have had the last several months. What I did though is I broke out some tasks and some measurables to achieve the task. And then so everything kind of goes downhill. So the goal is the broad goal, right? The strategy is how we're going to achieve the goal. And then the tasks go towards the strategy, which goes towards the goal. I mean, I look at goal, strategy, task as all synonymous, and it confuses me sometimes when I think about it. But the idea being is you just get more granular as you go from goal, strategy, task, measurement, timeline. So what they wanted us to do is they wanted to have more measurables, and they wanted to have a more specific timeline. So these measurables are the actual actions that we'll take towards the task, towards the strategy, towards the goal. So on goal 1, which is unchanged, rezone for densities necessary to facilitate the production of moderate income housing. That is verbatim one of the strategies from House Bill 462. And a lot of cities failed in their moderate income housing plan because they did not have verbatim goals. So we at least succeeded in that regard. So the strategy, evaluate isolated areas of zoning with low density or large estate lots into higher density single family lots where established neighborhoods will not be disturbed, while also considering and minimizing impact on the traditional rural character of North Logan City. So that's substantially similar, if not identical, to what it was before. So the 2 tasks that I broke out to achieve that strategy and goal is that we will work with both the Planning Commission and City Council to identify suitable locations throughout the city that could be upzoned for higher density residential development. And then you'll start to see the measurables are actually what we had originally under our timeline. So I kind of just shifted them up and added more detail, but the measurable for this task, there's two of them. One is to schedule and hold joint planning commission and city council workshops to identify candidate upzone areas throughout the city. So when they say, what did you guys do towards goal one? We can say we did have a workshop, or we had 2 workshops, or we had 3 workshops, but that's the measurable that they're wanting to check off when we do our annual reporting. And initially we said we would do that early on in 2023. That's what we had discussed. And so I just said, look, Q1, Q2, 2023, that's the timeline on that. A second measurable towards that task is to hold a public hearing to consider upzoning one or more of the areas identified during the planning commission city council workshop. So that's again a measurable. Did we hold a public hearing, or did we hold multiple public hearings? Those are, checkbox items we can check off. And I said 23 to 24 because we still need to talk about water, right? We still need to have that discussion of what is our water infrastructure able to handle. So I tied that timeline to one of our other strategies below, that we would wait until the well was complete so we could evaluate what appropriate density we could allocate. Strategy 1.2, evaluate applications for zoning map amendment as they are submitted and consider rezoning to higher densities while also considering the general plan and other factors. Again, that's unchanged, but I broke those out into a couple of tasks and measurables where this is not really on us to move forward. It's on the development community to bring applications to us for consideration. But task 1.2.1, work with developers as they submit rezone applications to identify residential densities necessary to facilitate the production of moderate income housing. So this is contingent on them submitting it to us, and then we work with them to identify, some densities that could facilitate that housing coming to fruition. So on measurables, it's the number of rezone applications that have been approved with densities necessary to facilitate the production of moderate income housing. And it doesn't say we have to, it's basically just saying it's a measurable. Did we have an application that came through the door where we could identify some densities that could have moderate income housing capacity? Yes or no? Second measurable, number of development barrier discussions held with local developers to identify requirements and processes that pose as barriers to the development of moderate income housing. We could even say we had one of those tonight, Commissioner Coleman. We had a discussion. We discussed some barriers that could limit, the development of moderate income housing. So that's on a timeline that's continuous. It's contingent on developers. So the timeline is kind of open-ended. We'll do it when it comes in. We'll do it when we have an application to consider.
And Scott, are you the one that would be responsible to keep track of the number of times each of these come up throughout the year?
Unfortunately, yes. It'll be tedious, but the state is not going to let us get away without having detailed reporting going forward. So it's just something we're going to have to do. So I'll just kind of keep a spreadsheet. So just so everybody knows, Commissioner Coleman and I and Commissioner Isaacson had a quick discussion with the developer, as we call them 2x2s. They're a discussion where we take a couple of planning commissioners and a couple of city council members, and they just throw their ideas at the wall and they want feedback, just super high level feedback on, is this a direction the city wants us to go? Should we even pursue this type of an application? And that just helps them to determine, do we even want to approach the subject at this time? Is there an environment that exists within the city where this could lead to success or not? So we had that discussion with the developer today, and that could be, one of these discussions we had with developers to discuss barriers that the development community may be running into that we need to be aware of as we set policy and talk about our regulatory environment that may be hindering the ability for moderate income housing to come to fruition. So I'll just put a check mark in my spreadsheet and we'll use that for reporting at the end of the year.
You also need the date and topic discussed for documentation.
We would document a little bit. Yeah. So it's.
Sorry. I said you also need the date and documentation of the meeting discussion.
It would probably go a long way. Yeah. So again, this is all under the strategy that we evaluate applications for rezones as they're submitted. Okay. So this is working with developers. And then the second task is to perform biannual reviews of the previous year's rezone applications to identify opportunities where the city could facilitate future rezone applications to achieve the production of moderate income housing. This is again, a little bit of a fluff piece, but they wanted us to break this out and have very specific measurements for ongoing strategies. So anything that we had that was ongoing, that didn't have a timeline, they wanted us to have something in there that meant that we were keeping it at the forefront. We're continuing those discussions. It's not something that we can just check off the list and say we're no longer working on this. So I felt the need to break it out so that they wouldn't ding us on that requirement to be continuously reviewing our processes. And so I didn't want to do it annually because we may only get 1 or 2 rezones every year. But every other year, maybe we'll look back and we'll say, what about this rezone? You know, could we have done maybe differently, or could our regulatory environment been differently to facilitate moderate income housing? So it'll be continuous, but we've said that we would do it on a biannual basis. Okay. From a measurement standpoint, it'll basically, did we complete that biannual review? Yes or no? And have we adopted any improvements to our code or that are intended to facilitate future rezone applications and their ability to achieve the production of moderate income housing? So we can report back to the state. We did make a couple of changes to our code intended to facilitate moderate income housing, or we could say, no, we did not. And it's okay to report that we did not do anything, but they need to know that we are not forgetting about it. We'll just say the opportunity wasn't there and we haven't made any adjustments to our code. Okay, so I guess what I'm hoping to convey is that the goals and the strategies are not different from what you guys had approved the first go around, but they are more detailed and there are measurements that are added to them that we can check off and facilitate state reporting on an annual basis. There's rough timelines that say, okay, we're going to try to do these in this rough timeline. However, we're still putting in here that some of it's contingent on developers coming to us. Some of it is contingent on infrastructure coming to fruition and verifying that we have the resources to provide for that density to come online. But the state looked at this and they said, okay, there are measurables, they're specific, it is verbatim to the state ordinances, this is acceptable to us. So on that first goal, do you guys have any questions? Have you had a minute to look at it enough to wrap your head around it? Or we can have additional discussions. There is a little bit of a time crunch. We have until mid-February to update and readopt with a compliant plan. So we are still eligible for funding. That's our only constraint. We can have another work session. You guys can read it in more detail and then come back with any questions or concerns or modifications. My hope is that if we want to modify anything, we do it soon enough that we can get a modified version back over to the state, have them review it, give us their comments, make sure we're still in the compliance green check mark bubble before we run out of time. So
What's the process for this? Like, if we feel comfortable, then what does they have to go in?
So today's just work session. This is just to educate you on the changes that I'm proposing to get us into compliance. We will have to have a public hearing, so that will be either next meeting or the following. We don't want to have it beginning of February because we still got to take it to city council. So between now and we've got 3 meetings to work with today, 2 meetings in January, and then we need to move on.
Right. Okay.
So Scott, my recollection from the last time we talked about this was the carrot that the state is dangling for this is priority access to some road funding that
Transportation.
we have not
funding.
historically used here in North Logan City. Is that right?
I don't know. Alan, do you know if we've used that
That's
funding
correct.
source, TIF and TTIF?
I don't know if we've used it.
TTIF is transit, so I kind of doubt we've used transit.
Haven't used transit, but, we may have reviewed those, stops, transit stops.
Mhm.
We may have, that one.
Right.
In that regard. So we have to be really leery of the Class C road fund. So they put that several times as an option to remove that. As potential funding.
The state has said that with respect to this moderate income housing.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Class C road funds, is a massive portion of our, annual road maintenance. Fund. It goes into our general fund. A lot of our impact fees, revenues going to for minor, for specific roads. The Class C road fund can get all of them, so it's like $300,000-$400,000.
Okay. So just accepting that we were non-compliant is, and then moving forward is probably not an option here.
No, and to be quite honest, we had some work sessions with the league last couple of weeks and had a representative from that state office that are reviewing these. And their concern is that if communities aren't taking this seriously, then the legislature will be a little bit more heavy-handed than they otherwise would be. And I'm not saying that we need to toe the line just to keep the legislature happy, but what I guess I'm trying to say is we're not going to get away from this. And the more we kick the can down the road, the harder it is going to be to bring a plan into compliance. That's my personal thought. We'll see how and where things go this year. But I mean, it's an admirable cause and we definitely need to keep our eye on housing. But yeah, from a punitive standpoint, the road funds are important. We also did, and I don't know if this ties directly in, but we did apply for a grant through UDOT for our general plan. UDOT has a grant program called their Technical Assistance Grant. And it's a fairly low matching grant that we're hoping to get a substantial amount of money out of to do our general plan. And I don't think that these are tied together, but when you're looking in a competitive environment and we get a reputation of not being compliant on multiple things, I just don't want there to be something in someone's head on the selection committee that says, Logan doesn't even try to be compliant. You know, maybe they have just a bad taste in their mouth. I don't know how much that goes into this, but at the end of the day, this is not the end of what we've seen here. It's going to continue, but we know that this can be compliant if we move it in that direction.
It is interesting how many are non-compliant and if they get funding.
And it seems to be like the majority are non-compliant on technicalities.
So they're all.
They put forth good effort, and it's not like they'd. Maybe some were like, we're just going to throw just a couple of sentences on the piece of paper and then say we're good. But they are being very specific. They're saying, hey, if it's not of high enough quality, and this is verbatim out of our letter, they said it needs to be substantial quality, sufficient enough to report these measurables. And they didn't think that it was specific enough. So
Did you say this is being governed by the DMV?
it's
Workforce Services.
Workforce Services. They're going to take our driver's licenses away if we're not compliant.
Make you wait in line for hours.
Well, they seem to be a little stickler on everything.
They should do that to get people moving. Nobody
You've
wants to lose a
done it,
driver's
sir.
license.
All right, what would you like from us, Scott?
Do you want me to go through goals 2 and 3? I think
Oh.
you get the gist of it, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
we-
I went through them all.
I reviewed this before too.
Okay. So goals 2 and 3 are the same. I mean, they're more specific, but the ideas are not changed from what we've
Right.
reviewed before.
Yep.
Okay, if you guys don't have any other questions, we'll probably schedule this for a public hearing, next planning commission, just so we can keep this ball
Yeah.
rolling.
About that?
I think it would be very beneficial to get up if we can get one round of feedback.
That would be good. The timing.
Yeah, well. Yeah, it'll be January 5th.
Okay.
Well, 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks away, 3 weeks.
Okay,
Awesome.
let's move on to discussion regarding the city initiated text amendment to the city's floodplain development requirements.
This is Alan's baby.
Excitement is, I've been waiting all night for this.
I honestly looked at this, I'm like, well, Alan can give us.
Want to draw your attention to the time,
Oh my God.
7:10. Oh,
These
just
are,
like the.
these
agenda.
are some.
Do I need to
Right.
go quick?
What's
do I
up?
need to go
Please state
quick?
your name.
Alan John
Could
Luce.
you stand?
You state your social.
I need a
security
stool.
number and-
All right, do you have the folder?
So just so, and I apologize,
Oh, thanks, Scott.
I did not print off all these documents because I would have killed the tree to do so.
Oh, it's
There
very
were a
lengthy.
lot for this.
It's very lengthy.
You want just the ordinance?
Yeah, that's fine. In working with the state kind of has primacy. They basically manage the floodplains throughout the state for FEMA. These are all FEMA floodplains, and North Logan has a floodplain within our city. And so this ordinance, we already have an existing ordinance, the floodplain ordinance, kind of provides the guidance for how we approach any building that would ever take place or the lack thereof inside of the floodplain within the city. It provides guidance for us. Ours is fairly outdated. I don't think it's been updated for about 10 or 15 years, even just small sections of it. I asked the state if they could provide me with a template for the latest floodplain ordinance from the state that has all of the regulations. And so they sent me this template. It's several pages. And so I went through and I just basically updated it to it kind of gives you options to cater it towards your community's needs. And so I kept it somewhat similar to our existing ordinance, and I basically just selected all the things that match our existing needs. Now, keep in mind though, that's our floodplain, currently our FEMA floodplain coming out of Green Canyon. Water's come out of that canyon twice in the past 100 years. In '83, it came out in a river about half the size or 3/4 of the size of the Logan River for a few hours. And that was due to a very fast rain event that came out of the canyon in April. And it did flood several areas that are highlighted there when it came out, and that's how that floodplain was developed. The only other time was in 2014 when we had that massive snowfall year. And it didn't come out in a flood, it just never stopped. It came out in a small trickle, a river, like the size of a really small canal that never stopped the entire year. So we had to allocate it through and channel it through the gravel pit until it actually ended up hitting the canal over time at certain points throughout the year. So those are the only two times in the past 100 years we've had water come out of the canyon, out of Green Canyon. However, they're part of the floodplain currently, and to build anywhere in that area that you see right there, you have to follow the regulations that are stipulated within that floodplain ordinance. And it gives very good guidance as to you have to be above a certain base flood elevation with any of your building or living areas. If you are to build in there, you have to get certifications from engineers. And there's two forms in there that actually stipulate that, one from the city and one that's actually a FEMA floodplain application that we would have anyone who builds in there apply to do that. Now, North Logan City, though, this floodplain will be updated in the next few years, or at least it should be. We've been waiting on this since 2007. Canyon Gates, a subdivision with some different type of people living in it. That subdivision
Like Alan.
has
Riffraff.
260 future homes going into it. But before they can move through certain portions of this subdivision, meaning they wouldn't even really allow building in several portions of that subdivision, they have to modify the basin at the mouth of that canyon. So that giant gravel pit that they've been working on for years, they're somewhat shaping it to a planned design by a hydrologist that would handle the 6-hour 100-year event. So a 6-hour 100-year storm event is what that basin is supposed to handle. And what they would do in the coming months or coming years, or since 2007, they would need to apply to the state and to FEMA for what's called a letter of map revision. They call it a LOMAR, just as an easy acronym, or a certified letter of map revision. The CLOMAR is what they call that. Regardless, they need to apply that. It takes a couple of years to go through that process. And so they would need to take the good thing is the hydrology study's already been done. So the tough part, it's a 50 or 100-page study. They would submit that to the state and apply to modify the actual floodplain, the blue outline you see here. So when that goes in, you'd likely just see that blue floodplain localized at the mouth of the canyon, and then a small portion that would come down through Canyon Gate subdivision. That's just my best guess, but that would be what they would submit to FEMA for approval. That's unrelated to this ordinance change, but it guides it just, I wanted to go over how you'll see that change in the future. You'll see that blue area kind of disappear at that point. And it'll just basically be right here. Right here, you see a blue circle, then kind of come down here and stop, kind of just below it now.
So this what you see in blue is a zone A floodplain, which basically means somebody with a fat tipped Sharpie just kind of drew general lines of where they think the flood water went. And what this developer is doing is they're getting very specific with an engineered hydrology study that they submit to FEMA, and FEMA, if they agree with the assumptions and the analysis, they'll stamp it and they'll say, we agree with you. Thanks for doing the work for us. And then they'll revise the map to be less invasive.
But that's the process that takes 2 years, right?
You can. I had a developer do it in 6 months. He called FEMA every single day and bugged the crap out of him, and they literally just shoved it through because they were sick of him.
That still took 6 months.
Takes
You don't like
time.
that.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a different process. That's a screaming fast timeline. So 6 months to 2 years, probably in that realm is very realistic. But this ordinance would only really apply until that gets changed. Because after that, we wouldn't really have any building whatsoever within that floodplain. We'd still have the ordinance, but there wouldn't be any building because you'd have King Park and then the Canyon Gates Basin, and there's no structures that would ever go in that area.
But if that other developer doesn't move forward in a reasonable time frame, we had this 2-lot subdivision come through for concept not too long ago. They would
Yeah.
be subject to that ordinance.
So it's that timeline. It could be another 10, 15 years under this new ordinance, which is very similar to our other ordinance, just a little bit more strict, a little bit more up to date with the state code.
You're referencing a specific developer. Is there something happening?
No, someone came in right here and
Just that 2-lot.
Oh, yeah, no,
subdivision.
I'm familiar with that. We just said earlier that a developer was,
Kenny Gates.
That's
so if they ever took it through the process, they would change the floodplain essentially. But
they would have to go through that process.
they would take it through the process, kind of holding our hand. We would have to approve everything and help them go along through it.
so Canyon Gates is that whole parcel on the east of that map.
Canyon
right
Gates
there.
is everything from up on.
2450. And then all the way up.
You want
east.
to pan down a little bit this way? It's everything across the top. It goes all the way up through here. This is 260 lots
To 430.
to 430,
Somewhere in
whatever
between
ends up
there.
being.
That are going to build.
There's phase 1A and 1B that are completed in that subdivision.
How many phases are there again?
7 was in the original
Yeah, probably 7,
development plan.
8.
And so that's at the stage of a development plan right now.
No, it's,
Well, yes and no.
there's an
Uh,
existing one when phase 1A and B was originally built. But they haven't done anything beyond those two.
No, they can maybe draft.
And that was
concept plans.
2010.
Is that because of the FEMA floodplain issue or? Okay,
We don't know.
okay.
It's a good question, but we don't know. But you can see that some of these phases would be in the floodplain.
Yeah.
Down here, these phases. And so those wouldn't even be buildable at that time, unless they want to build them really high out of the ground.
How would that impact the road?
It wouldn't really
2300
impact
going all the
23.
way up.
We could build a road in the floodplain. You just can't build
Oh.
livable spaces. That's really what it boils down to. Because we have pavilions and we have well houses at the mouth of the canyon, but those are non-livable structures most of the time.
So they couldn't, even if they get whoever buys those homes from them, if they sign off that they realize they're living in a floodplain, they still have to build them up at a
Yeah, that's
certain height.
a very good question because the city has to, the state relies really heavily on the cities to really enforce these standards. And so you're kind of talking about people may assume a certain level of risk if they come in, but the city wouldn't even allow them to,
Okay.
because it would come back to haunt the city if anything ever really did end up happening.
Yeah.
And we signed off on it. So that's.
So this is just work session. Obviously it needs a public hearing, probably next meeting as well.
So what's the proposal? I missed it.
The entire ordinance. So these are just some of the certifications you have to go through, but it's how many pages is this?
So
ordinance?
adopting an ordinance?
Yeah, I would, well,
It would replace our existing.
it's to
Oh, I see.
replace our existing. Normally
Right.
we amend or we update.
Right.
This is more extensive than an update.
Yeah.
This is basically just scrapping the old one, putting this
Right.
one in. Although I'd say they're probably 65-70% coincident if you took the old one and this one.
But this is the state template, right?
This is the state's template.
Pulled out a couple of nonsense items.
They give you options. They go like A, B, C, or D in several sections throughout this.
Always see.
And yeah, the answer's D on this. I catered it towards where we are now and what it will be in the future when I went through it.
So the floodplain as identified right now, does that follow? I know you said that they kind of did that with the 1983 flood, but does it also follow like topographical features in the elevation model of the city there?
The north portion does. The south half is just kind of where the flood went in 83. I think they were just shooting for that, meaning how it splits right here. This one is kind of where the flood went.
Well,
It stopped around 16.
And all the gravel mining's
Yeah.
gonna be
change
all,
that.
it's all gonna be different now.
Yeah, it would be different right now if the water came out of the canyon.
Yeah,
Going beyond 16 would be a stretch for any flood coming out of there. So
right.
Even
They would have to
today.
jump the canal.
you have to jump the canal, you have to go through a giant 2 gravel pits, and then you'd have to
Fill up Allen's basement.
fill down the basement and go across the road. So, yeah, but it's just it's an element of protection, keeping people kind of out of harm's way if that flood did exist, because it has happened twice in the last 100 years, or water has come out of there in a flood, which means it can happen again.
Yeah,
So what is our next step on this?
Reviewing the 50 or 80 page ordinance.
It's
how
a
long
30
is it?
page ordinance, which is probably about the same size as our subdivision ordinance.
So Scott, were you gonna start reading that now?
Yeah, I'll read it. Yeah. Okay, starting on page 1.
Oh, we don't have time, Scott.
Sorry, Marie said 7.
7:22, we're after, this is the first time the whole meeting we've been over schedule,
Was
just for the
I'll
record,
Sneak away then.
because Alan was up there talking about FEMA. So the next step, public hearing,
Yeah, I mean, it is a land use
Yeah.
regulation, so it does need a public hearing recommendation to the city council. So we'll just put it on next week's meeting
I agree.
agenda.
okay.
Any discussion or?
I guess, and then if we adopt the new ordinance and then FEMA does change their floodplain designation.
This
we have to
ordinance
go
would still
through.
govern. It would just be that all this blue is significantly
Okay,
shrunk down in
okay.
size.
Okay.
So the ordinance is still there.
Still the same.
Highlighter gets thinner.
Okay, let's do it. Next
Like it.
meeting or whenever you decide. Okay, great.
Just win.
Staff business.
Let's see here. Our next meeting will be on the 5th of January. We'll have, obviously this one on for public hearing. We likely will be talking about some development regulations in the RE5 zone. That'll probably be on the agenda if we can get enough materials put together in time for that. We'll hold our nomination.
RE5,
RE5
only one section in town for RE5, right?
up on the foothill. Yep.
Yep.
We'll have our nominations for planning commission chair and vice chair. So make sure you're there so you don't be the odd man out who gets voted in as chair, right?
We should start seeing your campaign signs.
We'll have our public hearing for the moderate income housing plan.
Be ready. It's gonna be so fun.
Yeah, and then just so you guys are aware, we will be appointing another member to the planning commission. Dwight did put in his resignation. His term actually expires. His 3 years are up in February, so he's just going to take the opportunity to focus on other volunteer efforts that he's engaged in. So we'll likely call another member. So the mayor may be reaching out to a few of you guys to just discuss, but reappointments will happen for those of you who are at the end of your term for another term as well. So that'll be on city council agenda late January, the second meeting in January, just FYI.
So in that case, Heather becomes not the alternate, but one of the regular members, and then we try to find someone to be the new alternate. Is
So-
that right?
That's up to the discretion of the
Okay.
mayor. Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll let her reach out to you guys and kind of communicate that, but just there will be some shifting in the planning commission, just so you guys are aware. Yeah, other than that, happy holidays. We'll see you guys in the new year.
Awesome.
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Anything from you folks?
This
I
is
have
great.
nothing.
Okay,
It's
then
warm.
I'll entertain a motion to get on out of here.
The motion to end this meeting.
I second the motion.
And I was trying to think of it if I had to say a certain wording. To end this, that was slow motion. I should have had more. Oh, sorry, go
All
ahead.
in favor of getting on out of here?
I,
Aye.